So perhaps you've heard about a really popular life hack in social psychology about standing like a superhero for a few minutes to boost your confidence, which is often referred to as power posing. The science behind this idea collapsed in more recent years, though. In this episode, we're going to look at what's left of that power posing idea and some exercises that you can actually try before and during your next recording session or presentation. So this concept of power posing became really popular after a 2012 TED Talk by Amy Cuddy. Oh, just hold on. And Amy Cuddy also wrote this book a few years later called Presence, which I bought back then when it came out. The idea was based on a study that she was part of, and it was really simple to incorporate what they learned from the study into your life, which was what was in that presentation. They said that you could change your posture for a couple minutes and to this one or something really open and expansive and powerful. And you could then change your mind and even your physiology, like your hormones, they said, and making you feel more confident and more willing to take risks, they said. So the power pose could be used for all sorts of things as such in your life, like interviews and TED Talks and work presentations and teaching and YouTube videos and all of that stuff. But the science behind that idea has changed, which I recently learned myself when I was looking into it to see if it was still a thing. So in this episode, we're going to look at what happened to the power pose and the data behind it and what the current research now says. And a more useful way, I think, to approach what's essentially called postural feedback. And this can help you with that confidence, maybe a little bit, and your mindset for recording sessions and presentations. Hi, I'm Jen DeHaan, and this is Human Internet Theory. I've been on the internet for a very long time, and I've been making creative content for it for decades, for fun and for my professional life. And more recently, I got into performance and comedy and podcasting, and I'm bringing together the tech and the presentation stuff to help communicate as a human online. I'm sad about all this non-human stuff that's taken over half of the internet content now. Anyways, before we get into the exercises, we need to understand what happened to that original power pose idea. It's important to see why the simple life hack model that they, said would be very useful failed. So then we can focus on what really actually works. So power posing is the idea that this high power or expansive pose, like standing with your hands on your hips, like Wonder Woman or Superman or whatever, is helpful in many ways within your life. So the original premise was that this simple action could affect your mind and even your hormones. But the original study size that power posing was based on was very small. It was like 42 people. And because of this and potential bias in the way the study was run and some other issues, the lead author of that paper later retracted her belief in the findings. This was Carney, not Amy Cuddy. She no longer studies or teaches the concept even. So what's the current state of affairs when it comes to this thing? Does power posing have any effect on physiology, like the hormones, or your behavior, like the risk taking? So the evidence currently says no, it doesn't, or at least there's no clear evidence that it affects these things at all with like the hormones or the risk taking or anything like that. So what power posing or posture in general might do is have a small effect on your feelings. So adopting an expansive posture compared to a contractive one, which is like when you're hunched over, does show a small but fairly reliable effect on your mood, like feeling more confident or positive, for example. Now, this is a very subjective feeling, and it's going to differ greatly based on who you are. For instance, what your cognitive wiring is like. That's your neurotype. So a very important point here before we go too far is those studies that showed that there is an effect on your mood compared expansive postures to low power postures like slouching or contracting like this. If you're watching the video, you can maybe hear that in my voice as well. This suggests that the benefit might be simply don't slouch. A neutral posture, just not an expansive one, but just a neutral one, might be just as good as a power pose because those things haven't been compared in the studies. So the research is getting more nuanced. So a really recent study from June of 2025 found that variation in neck flexions, this affects the person's mood, the person who owns that neck. So your own body awareness can also influence the outcome. There are connections, but they appear to be very individualistic because that study also said it depended on the person's body awareness how much effect it had. So it's too early for very broad conclusions from this data, but it is a start and it shows that connection. Also, I will add a link to that 2025 study in the description if you want to access that and the very long name of that neck muscle involved. So while the newest data is still very clearly early and it still needs further study, we can use this preliminary information to our potential advantage. The useful part is postural feedback here. So there is plenty of study and evidence that our postures in general do affect human beings and the people listening to us. So our bodies and our postures do influence thoughts and feelings in some way. They can also communicate to your audience. We know that we pick up on subtext and all sorts of other things and attentiveness and so on from the body postures of the people talking to us. So this means that we can use exercises and record ourselves and look at it to analyze what is best for our own presentations. Depends on you and where you're presenting and what works for you and your neurotype and your cognitive, everything. It requires mindful, nuanced consideration and self-awareness between your mind and your body. That part is known and we can draw from it. And another known part to draw upon is my newsletter at humaninternettheory.com. What a segue, right? If you want to hear my thoughts about the industry news, tutorials, resources like downloads, and more, you can get all of that at the website humaninternettheory.com. So now that we've cleared away the hype or the pop psychology and my website, now we can focus on the concept that we can actually use, that postural feedback. And we can go over 3 exercises that you can use to find your best posture for presenting and for confidence. First, we're going to start and find a baseline pose. So this is your neutral posture. So instead of striking that Wonder Woman pose with your hands on your hip and your head held high, we're going to focus on counteracting the low power postures that we often fall into, which is the slouching or hunched shoulders and kind of contracting ourselves inwards. So this baseline pose is where we're going to start for each of these exercises. And you can do it either standing or seated. And if you're listening to me on the podcast, I'm going to describe what this looks like. So exercise 1, if you're standing, you want to stand with your feet hip width apart, or you can also do this from a seated position by placing your feet flat on the floor at about the same distance, roughly hip width apart. And in both cases, do whatever is most comfortable for you. Feel the ground beneath your feet. Now, gently lengthen your spine as if a string is pulling the crown of your head toward the ceiling, but keep looking steadily forward. Now, roll your shoulders up towards your ears and then roll them back and let them relax. Now, allow your head to float easily above your shoulders with your chin kept parallel with the floor. Now, hold this pose for about just 30 seconds while breathing naturally, easily in and out, and just notice how your body feels in this position. Now, I'm not going to wait for 30 seconds, but if you want to pause the show, feel free to do so and just relax in this pose for about 30 seconds. So you can use this pose prior to a presentation, to a video, or to a podcast session that you're recording. You can use it prior to teaching a class, and this pose can help you find that neutral position that you can always return to throughout the presentation or even throughout the day just to address your standing posture. You want to reach this neutral position instead of slouching. That's the main point of that exercise. So our next exercise is for right before you present or record. So this is using physical anchoring to create a sense of stability and to notice your senses as well. And this can be accomplished fairly discreetly if you're in a busy environment before that presentation as well. So exercise 2, we are going to start again with that baseline neutral pose. So first focus on your feet and what they're doing. So whether you're sitting or you're standing, take your feet and press them firmly onto the ground. So we're going to focus on the pressure of your hands next. So take your palms and press your palms down onto your thighs, or if you're seated, you can optionally use the arms of your chair. Focus on the sensation of that pressure of your palms and the stability that it creates in general in your body. And again, this can be done fairly discreetly as well. You can also, at this point, opt for a quick sensory scan of the environment. And this scan can really help with your focus. Say you have nerves or racing thoughts before your performance. This is really a mindfulness exercise. If you want, you can also close your eyes if this is available to you. So acknowledge the temperature in the space that you're in, indoors or outdoors. Acknowledge the sounds that you're hearing, perhaps any smells as well. So you're just analyzing all of your senses, taking it in, and just acknowledging what you notice. If you have your eyes closed, open your eyes at this point and just acknowledge the light in the room or outdoors. If any of those things become disturbing, just toss it out and engage with a different sense and just shift your focus to that instead. This noticing will bring you into the present where you are right now. And that's what you want instead of any anxiety or rumination about whatever is about to transpire. So now finally, let's talk about your posture during the presentation. So a really rigid posture looks and feels unnatural to yourself and to others. And our aim is often wanting a really dynamic postural alignment, which allows for movement and breath. And this exercise, this last one, is intended for practicing prior to an actual presentation or recording session, but it is practicing the actual presentation itself. In other words, you don't want to practice when you're actually doing a live presentation. So exercise 3, we're going to again start with that baseline neutral pose. So imagine that string that's attached to the crown of your head, gently lifting you upwards into that natural neutral posture. And this is going to again help you lengthen your spine without creating any stiffness. So you want to keep your shoulders relaxed and down away from your ears. And this allows your chest to open up. And this is really important for breathing from your diaphragm and vocally supporting your voice through opening up that diaphragm. So next, we're going to integrate gestures into this. So research shows that gesturing while you're speaking can lighten your cognitive load and actually help you organize and articulate your thoughts more effectively than if you aren't gesturing. So you don't want to plan or rehearse specific gestures, as that will probably end up looking pretty robotic, right? So simply allowing your hands the freedom to move about as you speak can be so useful. And you can notice whether you use them and what they're like naturally if you're practicing your gestures prior to your actual performances. You might even notice, are you holding yourself back because you feel like you gesture too much? Maybe you want to practice allowing yourself to do more natural movements in a safe practice setting, like this exercise, for example. If this is the case, it can be useful to practice explaining a concept that you know really well, and then pay attention to what your hands are doing naturally. A really good way of paying attention to it is just recording yourself and watching it back. So this is going to help you build awareness, and it's going to help you integrate authentic movement into your own personal presentational style. And you can refine it then if you feel like you need to. But in order to avoid that robot appearance thing that I mentioned, this is something that you want to do and practice prior to your actual presentations. And my own personal example of this gesture thing in action is seen in every video on this channel. If you're watching the video version of this episode, this is just what I do, and I just let it happen, for better or for worse. You decide. But this is the authentic way that I speak and I present. And I think a lot of it has possibly come from my days back when I had to gesture a lot for teaching dance fitness, because visual cueing was literally a part of my job. So I just chose to go with it and let what happened happen on this channel. So the power pose as a simple life hack is not supported by the evidence, at least when it comes to changing your hormones or some kind of consistent result for everyone, or that thing about making you take more risks and stuff. But what is supported is the idea that your posture sends feedback to your brain about feelings, and those results are going to be a little bit different for everyone. So that's why I've dropped those exercises in there so you can see what works for you. But the more universal ideas might be not to slouch, to figure out at least what is a neutral position for you that isn't contracted or slouching, and to become mindful of the results and how different they are in various contexts and see what works for you. So this is going to allow you to be present. It's going to allow you to breathe properly when you speak and communicate with your most effective instrument, which is yourself and maybe those gestures. So I'll be back next week for another episode. Bye for now.
Episodes are written, directed, edited, and produced by Jendahan at stereoforest.com. The show's website is at humaninternettheory.com. You can find this show as a podcast, distributed wherever you find them, such as Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Overcast, Pocket Casts, and more. Thanks for watching.